Hey there, GERO 508. How are you? It's a happy 4th of July weekend, and today's actually July 1st. It's Saturday, 2023. And I'm just going to be doing my lecture a bit earlier. We're going to build on what we discussed for last week, and we're going to focus in on the immediate health effects that stress and elevated cortisol have, with the number one issue being diabetes. And so we're going to talk about how stress can cause diabetes. It really makes things worse or exacerbates an ongoing diabetes condition. All righty, very cool. So I just wanted to give you guys a little update, okay? And you're going to be part of our journey, all right? You're our GERO 508 family this summer. And so I wanted to give you a little update about what's going on in our lives. And this is what happens. Life is oftentimes unpredictable. We learned last week about one of the most stressful situation you can have is stress that you don't see coming, kind of an unpredictable stress. And so Julie and I are going through a couple of health conditions, and we kind of saw hers coming, and realistically we kind of saw mine coming, but both kind of hit like a crisis right now, and so we're going to take care of it. But I just wanted to clue you guys in. All right. So first, what we're going to do here. Oh yeah, of course since I'm an academic, I'm going to create a little I created a little PowerPoint that is going to allow us to kind of go through what's going on here. So, alrighty. So, and I always, when I'm doing these recordings, I would love to go presentation mode, but the problem with presentation mode is whether it be this or Zoom. In my hands, I have found that the screen will freeze oftentimes. So we're not going there. All right. So why do I show this? Okay. So what we can actually begin with, I'll reflect back on this 2013 video. So Julia is 60 years old. Okay. And a little over 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with having a blood cancer. It's called chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And it shows the importance of health screens. Hers was detected not through doing a blood analysis. Okay, so they were not doing a complete blood count or a CBC. She actually had a routine colonoscopy, and her doctor, who is also my doctor, Dr. Chang here in South Orange County, who is an amazing gastroenterologist. He was looking at the little polyps that he had taken out, and she gets the call. And you never want to get that call from your gastroenterologist after having a colonoscopy. And he said, "Can you come into my office?" And you're like, "Oh my God, I don't want to have colon cancer." She did not, but what he did find was he found the blood cells in the blood vessels that were going up through the polyp. He, along with his lab, found that she had evidence of chronic lymphocytic leukemia, so abnormal looking white blood cells. It's the white blood cells that are called the B cells that are responsible for producing your antibodies. The way I remember that is a B cell with a hard B produces the antibodies, okay? All right, so that's been her journey, okay? This is just one of these kind of amazing things that happened, okay? And America is a great country, but also don't get fooled by a lot of the BS that's out there, okay? Especially in the media and things that are politicized. It was the importance of the Affordable Care Act, okay? So before the Affordable Care Act was made law, people would lose everything in the pursuit of health, specifically in treating their cancers, because cancer is such an expensive disease to treat, okay? So when the Affordable Care Act was going through Congress, Julia wrote a letter to President Obama, and she got a phone call, and the president's head press secretary asked Julia, would she be okay with President Obama reading her letter? Okay, so I'm going to go right here, and we're not going to watch this whole video, okay, but I'm just going to quickly go to
well, thanks to
the
Monica.
4-minute mark.
Standing behind me,
And before you do that, okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I want to make sure that I have optimal volume.
Is important.
All right, I'm sorry to cut you off, President Obama, but we're going to increase this right here so you can hear what he has to say. Anyway, so you're going to get here, and I'll send you guys this link if you're interested. He gets right about here. All right, so we're going to go full screen, and he actually reads Julie's letter that she wrote to him verbatim, talking about her cancer. Okay, so I just want you to listen to this. They didn't change a word, which is pretty awesome.
But I would advise them to check with the people who are here today, and the people that they represent all across the country whose lives have been changed for the better by the Affordable Care Act. You know, the other day I got a letter from Julia Walsh in California. Earlier this year, Julie was diagnosed with leukemia and lymphoma. I have a lot of things to worry about, she wrote. But thanks to the Affordable Care Act, there are lots of things I do not have to worry about, like whether there will be a lifetime cap on benefits, or whether my treatment will bankrupt my family. And I can't begin to tell you how much that peace of mind means. That's what the Affordable Care Act means to Julia. She already had insurance, by the way, but because this law banned lifetime limits on the care you or your family can receive, she's never going to have to choose between providing for her kids or getting herself well. She can do both.
Awesome. So at that moment in time, the lifetime limit on, we have the best insurance, PPO, that USAA offered, and at that time, our insurance had a lifetime cap of somewhere close to $1 million. You know, her first year of treatment for her chronic lymphocytic leukemia, during the clinical trial, we're going to talk about here in a second. And this is a picture of Julie 3 years later, the day that she started clinical trial, and this was the infusion. That first year cost close to $350,000. So we would have completely exceeded her lifetime cap, and then she would have been uninsurable, and we would have then had to have sold our house to pay for her care. All right, so these are very, very difficult, stressful decisions, tapping back into what's going on in GERO 508. And you know, lucky for all of us, it's a blessing that President Obama was able to get this by. It's an imperfect law. We should have much better community-based, socialized medicine that will ensure that people don't go broke. Because still, the out-of-pocket expenses for people that are, for example, in Medicare, can be significant. And but it was a huge step forward. So it's pretty amazing. So anyway, I just want to kind of show you what was going on. So this is the way you're going to get a readout. You do a complete blood count, and then you'll do what's called the differential, and you're going to go down and you're going to look at the individual cell types. Her particular flavor of cancer, okay, the lymphocytes, okay, in particular it's the B cells. You have T cells and you have B cells. The B cells are cancerous, okay, and this right here, the green line, is the normal range of how many of these cells should be in your blood at any point in time. Yes, they spike during an infection, and then they go away. Hers were chronically elevated. You see right here, way above normal, and then it took off, right there. And this is when things got really, really, really difficult. And at this point in time, her hematologist oncologist said, you know what, it's go time. And so luckily, and people that enroll in clinical trials are heroes, because you are putting your body out there, okay? And you get a concierge treatment in terms of your cancer or your diabetes or whatever the clinical trial is all about. But it's all new territory, and there can be some risks and side effects, but it moves science forward. So her clinical trial was a great clinical trial, and so you can see right here, then after the spike, it came down, and then boom. All right, so this is when the trial was happening. All right, so the initial phase of the trial was 6 months of infusion of an antibody that would take out all of her B cells, okay, the good guys and the cancerous ones, okay. So she was very immune compromised during this period of time, okay? And then for the next 3 years, okay, all the way through here, she was taking a pill every day that would slow down the growth of the cancerous B cell. It's not like chemotherapy, so it was a lot more targeted. So it was a lot better, but there was no free lunch, definitely not. Anyway, so that was her story, and what you see here was this incredible success story for 3 years, where her lymphocyte count stayed way, way, way down. Okay, awesome. For her at that moment in time, and I was going to go like this. One of the most threatening aspects of her cancer was the fact that this is another type of cell, another fighting bacteria fighting virus cell called a neutrophil. Her cancer, okay, which was the lymphocytes right here, okay, um, aggressively attacked her neutrophils, and see her neutrophils got down to about 100 cells per cubic millimeter, okay? And that's life-threatening. You see the normal, this is the normal range, this is low normal, down here, infections will kill you. So it was really touch and go, okay? But then with the trial, okay, you see it came back, and it stays in this healthy range for the next 3 years, all right? Which is awesome, okay? Um, we see right here, okay? And I'll go back to it. So this was called autoimmune neutropenia, what was going on. So the cancerous lymphocytes that she had were throwing antibodies at her neutrophils and killing them off. And so then, and you have a whole slew of different immune fighters, and these guys are really important, right? So that's what happened there, okay? At the same time, we can kind of look at other aspects. We can look at, for example, her red blood cell. This is a readout of the red blood cells, the hemoglobin. And you can see that she was kind of on the low end, okay? And during this crazy time, it got down low. But it stabilized during the trial, and it stayed great, which is awesome, okay? We can look right here at her platelets, okay? Again, they were on the low end, and this seems to be her flavor of leukemia, is that she has a lot of autoimmunity, and it tends to go after the good guys in your blood. So platelets are the ones that allow you to clot, so you don't bleed to death, okay? And you see that it kind of rallied back, and it's all good. All right, so this was a feel-good story for 3 years, and then we can kind of expand the time frame here, okay, in a different scale right here. This is how you study how many of the cells are cancerous. So they're called chronic lymphocytic leukemia cells. And we're looking at all of her lymphocytes, all of her B cells at this point in time. And this was, whoosh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, there. This was her kind of her march upward. So she had chronic lymphocytic leukemia when President Obama spoke. Again, they're way high right here, okay? And so 24% of her lymphocytes were cancerous, okay? Then it raged up here, and whether it was her bone marrow or her blood, 75% of the cells were cancerous. So this was, it crowds out all of your good cells, your immune system doesn't work, and then it attacks your body, as we saw before in terms of her neutrophils, all right? So that was really tragic. She went into the clinical trial, and you see here, this is 2017, okay? 2018, 2019, 2020, everything was cool, all right? It was a success. 3 years is a good run, okay? But then what we see right here is suddenly it started to come back. It started to come out of remission here. So we have 2.7% of her antibody-producing cells were now cancerous compared to 0.1% when things were at its best. Okay, and we see here of September of last year it was 10.1%. And it continued to progress. I don't have the graph here, but what I do have is 4 months ago, her 33% of her B cells were cancerous. Okay, and this is not a good thing. And so, and then her hematologist oncologist says, we're going to have to treat this, but we had already planned. And Chong Huang, who's in the class with us, in your 508 class, he went to Costa Rica with us along with 17 other students. He said, enjoy your time at Costa Rica, and then we'll address this when we get back, okay? And things did continue to progress. So this is, again, we see here from 2013 to 2022. This is 2022 November to July 1st here in 2023. So this is over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months time. Okay, and so what you see is her lymphocyte. This is the normal range. Her lymphocyte count is growing, and so this is what happens: is the cancer cells just grow. They're nonsense cells, and it then crowds out your blood. Okay, and the most troubling part for her is we look down here. Okay, and what this is right here is this is a measure of her red blood cells. Okay, so this is looking at her hematocrit right here, and you see that it was trending downward, and then the cancer took off, and it annihilates her red blood cells. You need your red blood cells to breathe. Okay, so and so she's getting shortness of breath. The liver can't handle all the damaged red blood cells. So we're going into work because we're a team. This is what you do when you're a successful couple. But she's going into treatment next Thursday, sorry, July 6th, okay? It'll be 6 months of antibody infusion at UCSD Morris Cancer Center down in San Diego. We go there because when you have cancer, you find out where the best facility is for your type of cancer. And for her unique form of leukemia, there is a group down there that's all they do. And initially it's intense. So Thursday will be eight hours of infusion, followed by Friday and another 8 hours of infusion. And we'll be doing that. I go to every session with her. And it'll be like that for roughly a couple months, and then they slowly slow down, but it takes 6 months. And at the same time, she'll be taking this very targeted anti-cancer pill that, in terms of leukemia, if cells get sick from the antibody, they're not doing well. It kills them off. All right. So it's a great way to push her back into as deep a remission as possible. And if she's lucky, maybe she'll get 6, 7 years out of this thing. So this is what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be talking to you guys about it. It's important that you know, okay? All righty. I'm an old dude here, and I've been surfing my whole life, okay? And I have lots of wear and tear on my body. And 5 years ago, I had a total knee replacement. 3.5 years ago, I had a special surgery here where they actually severed my biceps tendon, reattached it, and scraped the cartilage because I had bone spurs. It's called a Mumford procedure here. This one was in queue, wasn't doing great. And then as soon as we came back, Chang was doing surfing and I was doing surfing. We were doing good, but I could tell things were not right. As soon as I came back, I was changing the sheets in my bed, and I felt a kind of a clunk clunk, and oh, that's not good. Okay, and then I grabbed my dog, and it really hurt. Pop. That's not good. But everything looked fine and everything. I went and got an MRI done, but I had to wait in queue to go see the PA. My doctor was in Europe or something like that. My shoulder surgeon. And I started feeling better, so then I said, let me just see if it's scar tissue. So I went to go down surfing again, and on my fourth wave, I stood up, and it turned, and I felt this unbelievable cramp in my bicep, and I reached down, and I realized my bicep was rolling up because, well, guess what I did, okay? So I ruptured or severed my long head biceps tendon. Luckily, up here on the attachment to the shoulder, you have 2 tendons, so I'm able to use it and everything. It's a little sore, and you lose a lot of strength, and I won't be able to surf again if I don't do something about this. So I'm going to have shoulder surgery on July 10th, 2023. Timing is impeccable, don't you say, guys? All right. But I just want to let you guys know we're going to keep you in the loop, and guess what? We're not going to skip a beat on this, okay? You're going to get to live through this with us, and we're going to be doing our class, which is our job, okay? All righty. Thank you, President Obama. All right. So there you have it, my friends. So what are we doing here, okay? We're going to remind you always to keep your eyes on the prize. So yes, it's only July 1st, but you're going to go in there and you're going to review the mock journal paper where you're going to do your example study. We're going to look at something involved in stress, and you can look at something like, for example, today we'll look at you could look at salivary cortisol as a measure of stress in your human sample that you're going to be looking at. That's my dog Desi out there. He's protecting his domain. All right, so you'll meet Desi and Lucy too. Desi, you want to come over here? Come here, buddy. No, he didn't want to come. We have two rescued German Shepherd pointers that are amazing. Chong's friends with them as well. Okay. All right, so let's get back into our weekly assignments here. Okay, and so last week we started we're building a house. Okay, so you watched the amazing Sapolsky videos. We started talking about how we perceive stress, okay, whether it's sight, sound, smell, whatever, and then we activate the fight or flight response. Sapolsky discussed some of the health problems associated with it, and he really honed in on something we were talking about today. And when you are perceiving information coming into the brain, like right now I'm looking at my dog, and if it's stressful, then that's going to activate the amygdala. Okay, the amygdala then tells the kind of air traffic controller of the brain, the hypothalamus that controls all your body systems, to recruit them so that you can do your thing and have that fight or flight response. That's the hypothalamus. Okay, and then it goes through the pituitary to the adrenal. Okay, as well as we learned about the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. In fact, I'm going to go right into that guy right here, okay, lecture 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to access this PowerPoint that was part of your class, okay, and it's coming. There it is, okay. And so we can reflect, look at that bicep. You know what they call that? They call it Popeye arm, is because it gets all rounded up like Popeye, okay. All righty, so one thing that we kind of honed in on when we were going over this, okay, is we have the fast wiring program and then the wire to the adrenal gland, okay. We also talked about the slow response, okay. This is the endocrine response that brings in the cortisol right here, and the cortisol is always feeding back, trying to shut the system down, okay. So as it gets elevated, you want to turn it off if you're no longer seeing that stress. And this really helps to accelerate the turning off of the system, because being in stress mode all the time, as you know, but as we're going to talk about in this class, can have some significant health problems, okay? It's not good for your physiology, all right? And so you want to be able to turn that off. That axis, okay, is important to maintain, okay? And this is what we talked about here, okay? So we have this feedback all the time, okay? And remember, these parts of the brain, Sapolsky showed us that these, not only the pituitary, okay, right here, it's feeding back, but it's feeding back on the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, trying to shut things off, okay? But if you're chronically stressed, things degenerate and this shut off begins to fade. Okay, so that means every time you're stressed out, you release even more stress hormones, okay? And that's going to predispose you to all the conditions that we saw in the video, all right? So let's go over that a little bit more then, all right? So we're going to go back here, and I'm just going to go backwards with my browser here, and we're going to go right in here to what I consider to be the most significant impact of the stress response, and that is that you dramatically increase your risk of having diabetes. Okay, so what you do is you're going to start here, and what I've done is I've created a little overview of every video. So we have 3 pretty neat, nifty, so to speak, videos, 1, 2, and 3, that really go over the consequences of having chronic stress. So this kind of reflects back kind of a grand overview of what stress is all about, okay, and then it kind of hints at the problems. And yes, if you elevate blood sugar all the time, okay, and then what happens? You don't use it. The sugar gets redirected, okay, and gets pushed into fat cells, and fat's very inflammatory. It causes insulin resistance, and next you know, you have diabetes, okay. And so they talk about this, okay. So now with the insulin resistance, you're not able to shut the stress system off so well, and and remember, the brain is degenerating because of the chronic elevation of stress, and they talk about this axis. Okay, so it's the perception up here of stress. Okay, incoming information, my vision, my hearing, going to the amygdala, going to now the key one, the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, and they then talk about the dysfunction on that. All right, and then they make a hint to Dr. Rayburn's studies about how it affects certain cells, the chromosomes, the DNA. Remember the caps that protect the DNA. So the concept is if you degenerate or lose those caps, those telomeres from your chromosomes, then now you're much more vulnerable to one, not being able to put in brand new cells when you need them, and two, you're not able to protect the cells from mutagens, and so it's a link to cancer. So yes, stress is linked to cancer as well. Okay, it's all epidemiology. All righty, cool. This one then goes into it a little more in terms of let's look at the biology. Okay, really cool, really well done video. I love it, the cartoon basis of it, because it's really easy to kind of capture and understand. All right, so they talk about the stress hormones. Okay, and yes, if you're chronically stressed out, okay, you're going to have a lot of adrenaline. It causes constriction of blood vessels. It causes hypertension that can damage your blood vessels. Okay. If now you have elevated glucose all the time, okay, because you're becoming insulin receptor, having insulin receptor insensitivity, okay, from the cortisol, and it does contribute to that, then that's going to generate the atherosclerosis. So now we're going to make this jump to the metabolic syndrome, okay, where you have diabetes. Now you're being permissive to getting atherosclerosis in all of your blood vessels, okay? Not just the individual one, but all of your blood vessels, okay? And what that does in terms of your health, okay? Kidney disease, diabetic retinopathy, where you lose your vision, okay? Stroke, okay? Heart attacks, on and on, okay? So again, think stress, think insulin receptor insensitivity, think diabetes. Okay. Now, but the other thing that happens, and Julia has said this, she sometimes when you're really stressed out, she says, she says, I eat because I'm sad, and then I'm sad because I eat. And there's this kind of this cycle that happens. But what's happening when you're stressed out is the concept is you're being chased by a lion. Okay. So you need to free up all of your resources of glucose and use them, but you're not, because you're just sitting there. Oh my God, I'm worried about my shoulder surgery. Okay, you're stressed out, and then what happens is you elevate the glucose, and then the glucose goes nowhere. Okay, because it's kind of the stress is make believe in your brain, and then it immediately gets deposited in the fat cells. All right. So now you've taken the reserves of glucose from your liver and you stuck it in the fat cells, and the fat cells grow, all right? And that then causes inflammation, and it causes an elevation of other parts of the metabolic syndrome, which is your bad cholesterol, okay? So the LDLs get elevated, et cetera, all right? So the other thing that is going to happen with all that, okay, is that if our physiology is we need to replenish our resources, okay? Because we've been chased by a lion. Even if you haven't, if you've just been sitting here, okay, stressing psychologically. So what cortisol does is it ups your appetite. All right. So going back to what Julia said, when people are really stressed out, when they have lots of anxiety, you tend to overeat. Okay, and then this just furthers this downward cycle, this downward spiral. Okay, and then they also talk about how something we're going to get into this class. Okay, so cortisol levels and high levels of adrenaline then change the acid in your stomach. Okay, causing pain, but also it changes your microbiome. Okay, that creates an overall global inflammation. So there's lots of different levels that are impacted, okay? In this particular video then down here, they hone in on, if you're a diabetic, why this is so risky, okay? And why you need to take control of it. And they talk about some stressful situations. A lot of us are caregivers. Julia is a caregiver for me, all right? She's gonna drive me to my orthopedic surgeon's clinic for my shoulder surgery on July 10th, and then I'm a caregiver for her, where I'm going to be driving down twice a week to San Diego to make sure that she's all good. In addition, when she's having those infusions, they have to give her Benadryl, which makes her too drowsy to drive on her own, and so I need to be there. So this, yeah, this is the reality, caregiver stress, and they talk about it there. All right, awesome. Okay, so now you're getting this overall feel, okay? This is a great article. Here's a PDF file if you can't access the URL. I like going into the actual website from Healthline, and they look at the impact that stress has on your body, all right? So I'm not going to read through this, okay? You guys can go ahead and read through it, and they go one by one. They talk about the nervous system, they talk about respiratory system, digestive system, musculoskeletal system, even sexual and reproductive system are impacted by stress. This is why people have trouble getting pregnant when they're highly stressed, okay? Both male and female. Immune dysregulation, okay? So it's a great overview, and there's a really phenomenal chart that just kind of reminds us of all the things that happen, okay? When you're stressed, you increase the likelihood of having clinical depression because you need to have an on-spot hippocampus and on-spot frontal cortex to be able to resolve issues, okay? And when you have chronic stress and you have actual degeneration of this frontal cortex, especially the prefrontal cortex, then it's going to tip the scale towards anxiety and clinical depression, okay? We see over here, you can have, as they indicate, headaches, insomnia. It weakens your immune system, okay? If you've ever had a joint injury and you want to get rid of the inflammation, we do a cortisol injection directly into the joint, okay? But because of that weakened immune system, now you're more vulnerable to infection. So you can actually have chronic inflammation because you're not able to fight off the infection because of the cortisol, okay? High blood sugar, okay, because you're just pumping, the cortisol is running to the liver and saying, give me sugar, okay, because I'm going to run, all right? So it elevates blood sugar. High blood sugar will cause high blood pressure. There's this whole process where you candy coat the proteins in your vasculature. And in addition, because of now it's going to be going into tummy fat and part of the metabolic syndrome, what's going to happen is you're going to have now elevation of your low density lipoprotein, the bad cholesterol, so to speak, and it's going to cause plaque formation. Also, you have adrenaline released. All that's going to increase blood pressure. That can be super damaging, okay? Pounding heart, risk of heart attack, okay, on and on and on. If you've ever had an anxiety attack, you know about the rapid breathing, okay? All right, awesome. So do check that out, okay? And then what we will do is we'll quickly hop over here to this quick article that goes over the consequence looking at the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Do not fear this article. It's actually done really well, okay? Easy to access. It's only a couple pages long, okay? So it talks about type 2 diabetes, and do realize that our country is in a huge epidemic of diabetes. In fact, the world is tipping that way, okay? It is predicted that by 2040, I believe it is, that in our country, 60% of our country is going to be either pre-diabetic or diabetic. 60%, right? These are just baffling numbers, and it's also happening worldwide, and they talk about that in this article as well, okay? All right, so they'll look at all the factors here, okay? So you can just read through this, okay? Again, insulin resistance is a big one, okay? The cortisol actually goes in there and changes the chemistry of an individual, say, muscle cell or liver cell, so that it no longer is able to put out the insulin receptors, or it's not, actually that was right, it's no longer able to respond to insulin binding to insulin receptors, and that's where the insulin resistance comes from. So they go over that, okay, and they again start talking about the consequence, okay, and that's obesity, and specifically, I'm talking morbid obesity and visceral fat, okay, that is a big one. So the outside visualization is a big, giant, round tummy, but more importantly, it's just that your heart and your intestines are all lined with fat, and that's not supposed to happen, okay, and that kind of fat really elevates your low density lipoprotein that causes vascular disease. Okay. Alrighty. We know from the chart that I showed you earlier about the brain sensing blood cortisol and Sapolsky that it's supposed to feed back and turn things off. This is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and we can see that when you have elevated cortisol, okay, that that this can go off rail. Okay, it doesn't work, and it's connected also to obesity as well. All right. In this article, they also talk about some people may be genetically predisposed. All right, so it's a good table showing you when you have a normal functioning hypothalamus, okay, sensing the outside world, okay. Um, your visceral obesity is low. Your fasting glucose is a non-issue. Fasting insulin is a non-issue. Triglycerides is a non-issue. Lower total cholesterol, low LDL. This is all good. And you see that when from high stress, when this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is now disturbed, it's not regulating correctly. You see all these indicators of this metabolic syndrome that put you at risk for vascular disease are all sky high. Okay. All right. So the World Health Organization talks about where we're headed right in this part of the article right here, and you can check that out. Okay. They then talk about an example here. So there is a relatively rare disease where the adrenal gland, the outer shell, grows really thick and large. It's called Cushing's disease. And in Cushing's disease, it really is kind of a clinical evidence of the role that cortisol has in terms of the abnormal axis up here and also all the health consequences like the diabetes and atherosclerosis. And so that's what they kind of talk about in here. Um, and they also talk about the deregulation, okay, up in the brain here, and there's a way to test that, okay? Alrighty, cool. Okay. They then go through here and they talk about some of the consequences um, of having this metabolic syndrome. We talked about LDL. You can have elevated levels of insulin like growth factor 1, okay? This big problem in terms of your waist to hip ratio. Yes, your BMI is going to be large, okay? We're moving away from BMI because it doesn't account for muscularity and really thick, large bones that you see in athletics. So we're looking at other things, including to that. So you're going to do blood analysis and looking at things like the waist to hip ratio as well. But we know what the drill is on that, okay? All right, and then they talk about this disturbed hypothalamic pituitary axis here. So you read through that, and they talk about the different stages where it becomes more and more insensitive, okay? Remember, we have these specialized receptors on the nerve cells that are sensing the levels of cortisol, and we know that they get downregulated. They don't work as, meaning that there's fewer in number, they don't work as well, okay? So now the system's not ever able to shut off. And we know that there is a genetic predisposition for this. So you combine nurture and nature. You combine the fact that maybe you're a little bit more vulnerable and you're stressing out all the time and having elevated cortisol, and then it becomes this really big downward spiral. And they talk about studies looking at this, right, as well, okay? All right, then they look at the pathology that we're going to see, and that's what this is all about. And so there's a little bit of social science. Who's going to get it? We saw this in the Sapolsky video, okay? And this is, again, low education, low socioeconomic, unemployment, work problems, okay? Poor economic status, okay? Solitude. We're going to learn about the number one predictor is from the Harvard study, longitudinal study that looked for 40 years of whether or not people were healthy and happy into older age had to do whether or not they were lonely, okay? And had to do whether or not that they had a supportive social environment, okay? So yes, the Center for Disease Control announced that we have a loneliness epidemic, and if we could just corral in the loneliness, then we would help then reduce the disease burden in our country. That is very, very, very true. All right. All righty. So let's look at the pathological consequences right here. When you have elevated fat, visceral fat, because you're stressed out, okay, again, you're releasing all this glucose, you're eating more, you need more glucose because your brain's saying, oh, I'm being chased by a lion, but you're not, okay? It then stores as fat. These elevated free fatty acid levels happen when you have visceral fat, all right? And so it's just a kind of a mass action. The more fat you have in your gut, the more it's going to get released into the blood. That stimulates the liver to produce LDL, okay? So you have high blood glucose, it's candy coating proteins, not good. Hypertension, you have high circulating levels of free fatty acids, that's not good, that stimulates LDL, and the high free fatty acids and the high cortisol both cause insulin receptor insensitivity. So you can see this is a huge downward spiral, but you can start also seeing what we can do to reduce this problem, okay? So this is a good figure that kind of looks at the problems here. So yes, we have genetic differences in terms of the whole system, your glucocorticoid receptors and how sensitive they are to cortisol. We have the environmental stressors, okay? You're low socioeconomic, you're lonely, on and on and on. All right, you elevate your blood cortisol, okay? It goes to the liver, and it says we need glucose. We're being chased by a lion, even though you're just stressing out about the mortgage or your career or whatever it is, okay? At the same time, the cortisol goes down there, and it does not allow muscles to store glucose either. It wants muscle to burn glucose because, again, who we are in terms of our evolution, we're being chased by a lion, okay? Alrighty, if, however, you don't use the glucose because it's all psychological, it gets pushed into fat, all right? So now we have high cortisol, high levels of circulating fats because if your abdominal fat's gotten bigger, and then what happens is you become insulin resistant. The pancreas, now this is way beyond this class. What happens is your pancreas will compensate as best it can, and then it begins to die off. And this is why type 2 diabetics, towards the end of their diabetes, then actually will need insulin injections because their pancreas begins to die off and can't keep up. Awesome. There it is right there, guys. We're done with this. Super, super cool article. We want you then to come down here. As always, this is your quiz, okay? 5 quick questions. And down here, we want you to build your house, okay? We want you to reflect back on the previous talks and then talk about the new stuff, all right? So this is what you learned from last week, okay? Reflecting on this week, and then this right here is what you're going to, what you learned from this particular lecture, all right? All right, so we're all good, guys. We promise you there's going to be no interruption. It's going to be interesting for you to kind of watch what's going on, what we're doing, all right? I can show you here my guns. So this is my left one right here. Okay, wait, all right, get my camera right, okay? And then you can see this one is, poop, a little shorter, and it's got a little problem right there. That's called Popeye syndrome, all right? All right, guys, peace, and we'll see you next time.